My mom was the one who always took the trash out in my family. Her dad was always the one that took the trash out in her family. So when we first got married, I just assumed she was going to take the trash out because my mom always had. And
Right.
she just assumed that I was always going to take the trash out because her dad always had. And what
Mm.
ended up happening was we had a pile of trash in the kitchen sitting there. Of all the decisions that men make, financial decisions that they make, the most important decision financially that you will ever make is the partner that you choose. Called executive functioning, decision making, emotional regulation, that kind of thing. When you're in love, that part of your brain shuts down and you can't see these things. And I think there's an evolutionary reason for that, because if you could see all of the problems that somebody else had, nobody would ever get married. We are bombarded with information and challenges and ethical decisions all day long. And that's why I think these virtues or the archetypes, they help us center and say to ourselves, what's needed of me in this moment?
Please help me welcome Chuck Chapman, a PhD in psychology and a certified men's coach. He has recently written a book called Finding Your Way Without Losing Yourself, The Path to Integrity. I'm going to link the book in the description. It's such a wonderful book. I'm going to ask Chuck a bunch of questions about it, and we're going to talk about so many other interesting things. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thank you, Chuck, for
Of
accepting
course.
to meet with me. It's
Thanks
such a
for having
pleasure.
me, man.
I've been reading your book, Finding Your Way Without Losing Yourself, The Path of Integrity. I've been watching your videos. So you are a PhD in psychology and you did your thesis on masculine initiation.
Yeah.
Something I'm very interested in, something when I speak to many guys, their eyes light up when they hear about it. So tell me your story, how things began with you. I read in the book about your first marriage and how all the hardship, and then from that,
Yeah.
somebody told you something that changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. Well, I think life has a way of happening to us, whether, we want it to or not. And I think that part of the masculine journey is that we're going to run into life at times. And most of the time, I think us guys, we're not really prepared for it.
Yeah.
I know when I was in my early 20s, I got married because I was supposed to. I thought, you get married, you have a kid, you get a career, you work there for 30 years, you retire, then you die. That's the path of life.
Right.
And early on in our marriage, we started running into some difficulties. Just first of all, we had a daughter who was born with a developmental disability. So she's now 33, and her cognitive ability is probably like about a 10 or 11-year-old. So she's really functional in a lot of ways. She's great. She's fun. She, texts me. Our favorite thing to do is dad jokes. So she'll
Yeah.
text me dad jokes all the time, but she's never gonna be independent. She's never gonna, get married or have kids and that kind of thing. And then the next thing that happened when I was 37 was I got thyroid cancer. And that just kind of launched me into a bit of an existential crisis of like, what is life all about?
Yeah.
And I started seeing a therapist at the time and saw the therapist for about 3 years. And it was such a gift. I decided I wanted to change careers and become a therapist. And so I started going back to school. I was working full time and going back to school. And then um, just as I was about to graduate, my wife then came out and disclosed that she was unhappy in our relationship and that she uh, was having an affair with a woman, and that she was leaving me to go pursue this relationship. And that was just devastating. And this was about 2008, where this was like the midst of the housing crisis. At the same time, I the job that I had for 15 years in corporate America, I got laid off from that. I wasn't quite finished with my graduate program, so I was kind of stuck in this middle state. And I just reacted to all of that with drinking. And I started drinking pretty heavily, and I had all of this pain, and I was trying to basically, medicate the pain that was going on in my life. And I felt so unstable that the first woman who kind of came along and showed me some attention, I impulsively asked her to marry me, and we got married. And
Yeah.
I had hid all of my addictions from her, and and then it all came out about a month and a half in, and um, rightly so, she left me, and I found myself in rehab, uh, trying to untangle all of this stuff that had happened in life, and and that's where I found the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started going to that. And I had a sponsor, and one day he gave me some wisdom, and he said, "Chuck, the reason you're suffering so much is because you're out of integrity." Now, I thought, integrity, okay, if that's what I need, let's get that. And then I was like, well, what is integrity?
Yeah.
So I started just kind of doing a deep dive into that. Finishing up my graduate program, started looking at, what's integrity from psychological, from philosophy, from theology, all these different schools of thought of what does integrity actually mean. And what I found was integrity isn't one thing, that integrity is a combination of things. And so integrity, the first part of integrity is integra, meaning
Yeah.
whole. And so the sum is greater than the whole of its parts. And integrity for me then became a list of virtues that when I live in alignment with my virtues, life's going to happen, but I'm not suffering. I might find some, it might be a little painful from time to time, but ultimately I'm not suffering. And as I started to kind of accumulate these different virtues, and I started applying them into my life, I found that things went a whole lot better. And then as I started my career as a therapist and started working with men, I started sharing the things that I found, and the result was similar, where they were suffering because they were out of integrity. They were doing things that they were hiding from other people, whether it was pornography or extramarital sex or whatever, gambling, all these kind of things, and it all is a result of this internalized pain that I think we all have. What existential therapists would call, sort of the existential angst. What is the meaning of all of this? And the more I looked into it, the more I started trying to live in alignment with my values or virtues, the more I found like I had a pathway. And
Yeah.
I think the thing about integrity is we're never fully in integrity. I use an example in the book of like an airplane, an airplane going from point A to point B, the pilot sets the course, but the wind and all of that is constantly blowing the airplane off course. And so there's an adjustment that needs to happen along the way. And so integrity is kind of like that. It's my course. Life is going to try to blow me off course, but if I have a map, then I can look at the map and go, oh, how do I get back on course here?
Right.
So I wrote the book just kind of a culmination of everything that I'd learned over about the past 13 years or so about what was helpful for me in my life in making my life better. And the result was, I stopped drinking. I stopped, using porn. I stopped having, impulsive decision making, and and like I said, most of the time, well, when I am in integrity, life goes better than when I'm not. And if I'm suffering, then there's a good chance I'm out of integrity someplace, and that's where I need to go back to the map and find out where am I out of integrity and make a correction there.
Very interesting. In working with all the men that you help, and you're a certified nice guy recovery coach,
Yeah,
working with
yeah.
Dr. Robert Glover.
Yeah.
what is the 3 most common things that people come to you with?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I do a lot of work with the nice guy syndrome, and for those that aren't familiar with the nice guy syndrome, wondering what is that? The nice guy
Yeah.
syndrome is people or men who are fraudulently nice. Okay, so in other words, they tell you what they think you want to hear, but then go and do what they want to do anyway. You know, the nice guy wants people to like, love, and accept him, and so he feels like the way to do that is to kind of be a yes man or whatever. And you probably, have met these kind of guys in your life where they're really nice, but they're not really trustable either. And and so a lot of the guys that come to me have read the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. They went, "Oh my gosh, this guy's been following me around and writing my life story." And then, they look up Dr. Glover and they find me on his website, and then they contact me and we start working together. But at the core of the nice guy is he believes, has an internalized belief that he's unlovable and unacceptable just as he is. And so he has to perform in order to get other people to like, love, and accept him. He also has an internalized belief that says, if I meet everyone's needs around me without them asking, then they will meet my needs without me asking. And so the nice guy goes around sort of assuming or hoping that everyone's going to meet his needs.
Right.
And he relies on all the people around him to meet his needs. And one of the ways he does it most is through validation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do something for you, right? And you're going to go, "Oh, what a wonderful guy you are. What an amazing man."
Right.
And that's going to validate me, right? And the problem with that is when we give someone the power to validate us, we also give them the power to invalidate us. And I found myself, same thing happened, where I read No More Mr. Nice Guy during my recovery, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." So I reached out to Robert Glover, the author, and he and I started a conversation, and then he had a certified coaching program, so I went through that, and then I started working with him a few years ago. I answer a lot of his emails that he gets, and I worked with him on a couple different projects. He, myself, and five other coaches, we recently built something called Integration Nation, which is an online community for men who are nice guys.
Yeah.
And they, it's a place where you can go and connect with other men. We've got live Zoom calls happening throughout the week. Dr. Glover does a live call every Thursday.
Yeah.
And then there's, just a bunch of other resources on there as well.
That's very cool. I saw you shared on your YouTube channel that chart with the masculine and feminine
Yes,
traits.
the masculine, feminine, yeah.
The higher consciousness and the lower consciousness. Yeah. What would you say is a good practice to do to start living in the higher consciousness?
Yeah. Well, I think, in that chart, I talk about how nice guys, oftentimes, we live in our feminine, all right? And the feminine is anything that you're doing to me. So if you're validating me, I'm in the position of the feminine. And I'm talking about energetic types of things, not necessarily like gender, but masculine does, feminine receives. And that's kind of the thing, you got a nut and a screw. One penetrates, one receives. Yeah. And so when I'm in the position of receiving, then I'm in the position of feminine. And most nice guys have a really well-developed feminine side. In fact, I used to kind of joke about it that, my wife, my first wife and I, it was like, I liked things like shopping and, hanging out and having conversations. And she was all about like, doing in sports. And it was almost like we had this reverse polarity, and we did. And it worked for a while until, she realized, she was a lesbian and really wasn't living her full truth. And so I sort of joke at that, I was so much of my feminine that I attracted a lesbian and kept her happy for 19 years.
Right.
But the masculine part of it then is coming to understand of the things that I'm doing, right? And my belief is that in integrity and these virtues of integrity, they're all about doing something. Okay? It's about courage is doing something, assertiveness, loyalty, wisdom, grace, compassion, self-control, self-mastery. All of these things are things that I do. And the masculine does, so the masculine loves. And when I'm walking in integrity, in accordance with my value, I am loving and I'm being love. So the masculine love, so I love myself, doing these things because I want to be a better man, and I show up and I give love to others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you're big on King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and I
the
am
archetypes.
too.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Would you say that integrity is about, so you have in the book 16 principles or 16 virtues.
Yeah.
And would you tie it to King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, that we need to be in integrity with the King principle, with the Lover principle, Magician, and Warrior?
Yeah, and I almost was going to try to do this, and maybe I'll go back and do it at some point. But the virtues kind of, almost are like in a quadrant. So like the first four are courage, assertiveness, tenacity, and loyalty, and those are like the warrior, right?
Right.
And then you've got the next ones, which are I have them all memorized here. Wisdom, honesty, humility, and generosity. And I think those are almost kind of magician, right?
Right.
Temperance, excellence, patience, self-mastery probably could fall in the lover, and then justice, empathy, grace, and forgiveness would be the king.
Right. Four
So,
for each.
Yeah. 16 virtues, right? Four for each. And so I didn't pull that out in the book, but it's something I kind of thought about in a way of presenting it from the standpoint of the warrior, king, magician, lover, that all four of those things, when we act in love, so the king, who is justice and forgiveness and grace, the warrior, that's all about courage, assertiveness, and tenacity, that when we're those things, we're in those different archetypes, and living from those archetypes, then we tend to have more energy, I think, around that. And the archetypes, these are masculine archetypes, and so integrity being the masculine, it kind of fits pretty well with that.
Yeah.
Overlay it there.
That's very cool. And one of your videos, you talk about choosing a woman, and you have to discuss money, sex, and kids, and also compatibilities in terms of work, family, friends, hobbies and interests and values. So what is a common pitfall for a nice guy when choosing a woman, and how can a nice guy make sure that he's on the path of integrity? Like you say, integrity is a path, it's not something you arrive at. And make sure that the woman that he's seeking to partner with also is on a path of integrity and not just,
So nice guys typically have two criterias when picking a woman. Will she have sex with me? and is she pretty enough? So hot woman that'll have sex with me, that's basically my criteria. And the problem with that is that when we also end up with women that either maybe aren't compatible with us, or on different paths, or maybe they have their own woundedness that they haven't worked through at this point. And so I think that choosing, I talk about this with Shawn Smith, Dr. Shawn Smith, who wrote Gatekeeper and Tactical Guide to Women. He's a good friend of mine, and he says that of all the decisions that men make, financial decisions that they make, the most important decision financially that you will ever make is the partner that you choose. And most guys will spend more time researching a computer that they want to purchase than they will the woman that they want to spend their life with.
That's right.
And I think that it's such an important piece. When we fall in love, our brain chemistry, where it's flooded with dopamine and oxytocin, all these wonderful chemicals, and we have this feeling of elation and connectedness, and that's the infatuation period, right? But we tend to not see a lot of the red flags that maybe other people see.
Right.
Part of that reason for that is because your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that sits back here, which is responsible for, called executive functioning, decision making, emotional regulation, that kind of thing. When you're in love, that part of your brain shuts down, and you can't see these things. And I think there's an evolutionary reason for that, because if you could see all of the problems that somebody else had, nobody would ever get married or be in a partnership.
Right.
But it's also, I think, really important to be able to, which is why I would say a longer, when you're in a relationship, taking a longer period of time to really kind of discern whether or not this person is the person you want to spend the rest of your life with is an important component of that.
Yeah.
Here's what it really is. It's about choosing consciousness, thought over emotional, feeling,
Right. I fell into that a previous relationship I was in. In the beginning, there were some problems, and my thought process was like, oh, as time goes on and as we know each other, they're gonna get less.
Right.
But the opposite would happen. And it happens in such small increments that years later, I'm like, man, I didn't.
How did I get here?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, it's just these little small compromises that we make along the way. It's like, I didn't really like the way she treated me there, but again, she's hot. She'll have sex with me, so I don't want to, get rid of that. So we make a little compromise, and then pretty soon, all of a sudden, we're like way over here, and we're pretty much compromised everything, and now we're in this relationship where we're miserable.
That's right.
But we've got so much time and energy invested into it that we're like, well, I can't break up with her because our finances are, we bought a house together, or we built a business together, something like that oftentimes happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's when something tragic happens. We hit rock bottom, and
you hit rock bottom, and then hopefully, you learn from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's important to talk about money, sex, and kids, and all the compatibilities beforehand.
Here's an example of that. Okay, so like my first wife and I, we didn't know anything. Basically, it was kind of like I saw what my parents did, and she saw what her parents did, and we got married. The funny thing is that my mom was the one who always took the trash out in my family. Her dad was always the one that took the trash out in her family. So when we first got married, I just assumed she was going to take the trash out because my mom always had.
Right.
And she just assumed that I was always going to take the trash out because her dad always had. And what ended up happening was we had a pile of trash in the kitchen sitting there because both of us thought the other person was going to take care of it, and then both of us became resentful when the other person didn't do what they thought they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we had a conversation and figured that out. But those are early days, and just one little example of how your past and how you grew up actually affects your relationship, and you may not even realize it until you've got some time together.
Yeah, and labels can be tricky. Like somebody labeled as nice guys, I believe everyone has a little bit of everything. Like we all have the king, warrior, magician, lover. And in relationships, in the beginning especially, it becomes more difficult to talk about things like, oh, let's talk about
Yes.
who's going to take out the trash,
Right. Well, because I want to avoid, I don't want to piss her off because then she won't have sex with me.
That's
Right?
right. So, what would you say a masculine initiation plays a role in developing a man and teaching him certain things? And does it include relationships as well, or is that something kind of separate?
Yeah, I think here's the thing is that um, when we're younger as boys, okay, we need from our mother, right? So when we're needy as boys, we tend to stay in that place unless another man comes along and says, it's time for you to grow up. It's time for you to be a man. And that's basically what an initiation is. An initiation is I'm moving you from you're no longer boy to now you're man. When you were a boy, this is what was expected of you. As a man, this is what is expected of you. And we've lost that through, years of domestication and, social conditioning and all of that to a point where boys becoming men, there isn't a threshold that they walk through. For example, a marriage is a threshold. So a marriage is two individuals that come together, they go through a ceremony. On the other side of the ceremony, they're now considered husband and wife, right? And that ceremony, all it does is it really just creates a touchstone, a point in time where we say, we agree that we are no longer individuals, but we are now a married couple. That's what a rite of passage used to do for boys to men was you go through this ritual and then you become a man. So we see this in Jewish culture, with bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, that it is a process in which the child goes from child to adult.
What is included in the bar mitzvah?
It's a great question. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not Jewish, but I know it says to do like some memorizing some things, and I should ask my friend Ted. He's a rabbi. I'll ask him what that is. But the every culture up until about 500 years ago or so had some kind of rite of passage for men.
Yeah.
And the theory kind of goes is that women have a natural rite of passage when they menstruate. Okay, so that culturally even is kind of a big deal. The girls are kind of waiting to see when they're going to have their period and all that kind of stuff. And where boys, we don't have that transition. Puberty maybe, but puberty sort of happens at a slower level. And so the rite of passage was about changing from feminine energy, boy energy, to masculine energy.
Yeah.
And I think because that's been lost in our culture, boys grow up, especially now with a lot of young men grow up without father figures, without strong masculine presence in their life. And so nobody ever really initiates them into masculinity. And I think that plays out in that we have a lot of men who feel like boys.
Yeah.
And operate as boys. And then, the women are frustrated because the men, act like boys.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the initiation process is basically it's a shift from feminine energy to masculine energy.
Right. Because for a woman, it happens naturally and biologically, but for a man, it needs to happen with outside help, outside support.
Right.
And then that ultimately leads a man to become more integral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That the integrity piece of it is an integration of these principles, virtues, values that I use as a guideline for me in how I operate and show up in life.
Right. Do you happen to share these values with some of your clients, or because values, they can be interpreted different ways?
Yeah.
So what is like a good startup pack for
Yeah.
a person? Obviously the book for the 16
Yeah.
virtues,
Yeah.
and you have journaling prompts in here, which are so important.
Yeah.
You also
Yeah.
talk about finding a community of men, brotherhood.
Totally important. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody about this. The importance of it is like, I think because of the, cultural and the way we're at right now, men have a difficult time connecting with other men on a deeper level. Really being able to share with each other kind of like what's going on in my life. And so we end up feeling like we're the only ones that struggle. We look around us and everybody else seems, guy across the street, he's got a nice truck and a boat and a car, a nice house, and it looks like everything's going fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know that he's been cheating on his wife and that, they're going to get a divorce. Just to me on the outside, sort of like the, Facebook, Instagram, everybody puts their best
Right.
shots on
Well,
there, right? So you
well,
sort of assume that everybody else has this great life. I must be the only one who is a fuck up and doesn't know how to figure this out.
yeah. Well, on
So,
the inside, most people are in quiet desperation.
yeah, exactly. So when you get with other men and you're able to practice vulnerability, which is the empathy piece that I talk about in chapter, I think it's 13, 14, 15, 16, some one in there. Okay.
Yeah.
That to be vulnerable and to be with another man is the ultimate form of strength.
Yeah.
Because then I realize I'm not alone.
Right.
And so a group is so important. One of the things I say in the book is if you don't have a group of men, form one. Like they're not going to appear. Somebody's not going to invite you to one because again, this is something that culturally we just have a hard time with.
Yeah.
The book is set up so that you can easily just say to a buddy, hey, I'm reading this book on integrity and having more integrity in my life. You want to join me? And, Saturday morning, let's get together. We'll look at one of the chapters and answer the questions together and we'll get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And, we'll just do that for 16 weeks and every week we'll do this.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, this is great. Let's invite another guy, and pretty soon you have 2 or 3 guys that are meeting together.
Yeah.
But you have to have the courage and the assertiveness to go ask somebody, hey, do you want to be a part of this?
Yeah.
So the first place to start is courage and assertiveness in going out and finding your tribe, your group.
Very cool. My initiation, I was initiated by a mentor named Elliot Hulse, and it was with about 300 other men. And it has changed my life. And just having that mirror, like you say, the vulnerability. So usually with friends or like in regular setting, we're just being, lover and warrior. There's a facade, there's an exterior. But when we get together and try to find meaning in how can I be something and how can I overcome this huge thing in my life, then you know what other people are struggling with. And it's a mirror, we're all struggling with very similar things. And that's actually how I knew that most men struggle with their voice. And I was like, okay, I struggle with it too. Basically, going through an initiation helped me have a business, helped me have a career, which is so helpful to so many people.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned in the book, that one bad habit, you give the example from the book of Psalms, is one foxhole in the field can ruin the whole harvest.
The tiny foxes ruin the harvest. Yeah.
Right. It's one bad habit can ruin everything, just you lose integrity.
Yeah. It's that death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like it's a little thing and it's really easy to compromise. Like we were talking about in relationships, it's really easy to compromise. Well, she does this thing. It's kind of annoying, but we'll compromise that. And it's a little thing. And then it's another little thing and another little thing. And then pretty soon it's like that death by 1,000 paper cuts where the little thing has become the big thing. And we find ourselves in the middle of maybe doing things that we never thought we were going to do. You know, for example, a lot of men, they marry, they don't have any intention of ever cheating, but it's a little compromise. You know, it's a little look, it's a glance, it's hanging on the conversation a little bit longer,
Yeah.
you know, and these little things start to accumulate over a period of time, and then all of a sudden they wake up one day in the midst of an affair and wonder how they got there.
Right.
So yeah, it's really important to kind of maintain your own personal boundaries even in the little things.
Yeah. I also want to add that environment is a huge impact. Like, for example,
Absolutely.
when I would try to hold up to my standards and be in integrity, people in my life, family members or friends, they would tell me, "Oh, you're being too, fixated on things. Just
Yeah.
let loose, let things go."
Right.
And that was one of the catalysts that made me lose integrity and let that foxhole ruin the whole field.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like, you take advice from people whose lives you wouldn't want to have, you know, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're like, you know, oh yeah, maybe I should loosen up a little bit. Maybe I am too strict. Maybe I'm too regimented, something along those lines. But yeah, I think I mean, you have to have a balance, right? Which I talk about in the chapter on temperance, of creating a balance in your life of, um, you know, any anything, too much of anything can be a bad thing. You can have too much water and die. You can have too much oxygen and die. You know, you can drink too much coffee and die. Anything to excess is going to create damage. And so I want to be able to have a balance in my life as well. So I'm practicing excellence, and I'm practicing self-control, and I'm practicing temperance. And in doing that, it also provides me the freedom to be able to be like, but I also want, you know, I need to have some fun, you know? So
Yeah.
that's oftentimes the thing that we sort of throw out, is the
Mhm.
recreational piece of it, the fun piece of it. We get so serious and focused, but I think having fun and learning to practice joy and learning to practice levity in our lives, that sort of counterbalances that as well. That doesn't mean like, okay, you know, I'm going to compromise my value and, you know, do something that's against my own internal value system. But what it does mean is, like, within that value system, I can still have a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's almost like fun is a value. It's like part of the lover. If
Yes,
you ignore the lover, well,
absolutely.
there's no energy, there's no passion, there's no meaning.
Right. 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 Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, we totally need all of that as well. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I think a lot of, especially the young guys, you know, focus on warrior and lover, and we forget the magician and the king. You know, and I think the magician is the wise part of yourself. You know, the magician is a consultant to the king. You know, the magician is the teacher. The magician is um, the one who practices, you know, the spirituality piece of it, whether that's within love or connection to a source higher than yourself. That's all the magician, you know. And then the
Yeah.
king is the sovereign part of yourself. The king is the one who manages all of this. I mean, I think if you were to take integrity, you know, that the king sort of controls all of those virtues, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Holds them
And
together.
holds them together, that the king is the integrity piece of it, right?
Yeah.
But I do love those archetypes so much because they're just a good framework for recognizing. It's kind of a twofold. One, what are my virtues? Okay. And where do I need more energy at? Magician, king, warrior, lover.
Mm.
We are bombarded with information and challenges and ethical decisions all day long.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a roadmap, if you don't have a compass to look at, and that's why I think these things, whether it's the virtues or the archetypes, they help us center and say to ourselves, what's needed of me in this moment? For example, I need to have let's say I need to have a difficult conversation with my wife. All right. I don't want to do that because she won't have sex with me. You know?
Yeah.
but, but what do I need in that? Okay, well, I need some courage. I need some assertiveness. Probably need some kindness, some temperance, some wisdom. These are the things. How do I approach her? Well, I need to approach her with a balance of the lover and the king.
Yeah.
If I just go in with warrior energy, then I'm gonna, destroy things.
Right.
But if I ask myself, okay, I need to have some courage. I need to have some temperance and love and compassion, and I need to bring that from my king lover. How can I do that? How can I, and so now, rather than being afraid of having the conversation, I say, hey, my love, I need to talk to you about something. And then you're able to just kind of express what it is that's going on for yourself.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well, time flew by quick.
It sure did, man.
Yeah.
We need to have another one of these calls.
That's right. I appreciate Chuck. Thank you so much for sharing the love and knowledge and the wisdom with people. And
awesome.
We'll be in touch.
All right, brother. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching till the end. I admire your commitment to acquiring knowledge to improve your life. The link in the description has Chuck's YouTube channel. He has a bunch of great content that I personally watch and get great wisdom from. If you want to purchase his book, I got it from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. And if you want to join a tribe of men to help you stay on the path of integrity and achieve the things you really want to achieve, you can join Integration Nation by going to Chuck Chapman's website. All the links will be in the description below. Stay well, and I'll see you in the next video.